Essentially, what is happening right now on the planet for all human beings is that we are going through an ascension process. What that means is that the actual frequency with which we all live in is beginning to raise. Our own bodies then are vibrating at a higher frequency.
That act of becoming aware of what's operating unconsciously, the patterns that we've taken on, the lower vibrational patterns that we've taken on from our family, from our society, whatever conditioning that we've been through, starting to become aware of those and how that is operating on autopilot within our own consciousness and then beginning to shift.
We need to be able to hold our dark parts, our shadow parts. It's not about seeing them and then denying them and turning away from them. We need to be able to see and exist in this world where we can see horrible things, we can see challenging things.
The 3D is just existing in this physical world, oblivious to the darkness that is existing, oblivious to the fact that we are creators, living more in a victim state, whether we're conscious of that or not. Remembrance that we are the creators of our experience, and rather than, I'm a victim of my circumstances, I cannot do anything to change this, I'm stuck here. That's more of a low frequency place to begin to recognize where is it that I get to choose. And so when we do that on our personal level, then we see how our lives can transform. When we start to connect with more people doing that, then we start to build communities, new systems, and that's really how we're going to move away from the current reality of this lower vibrational state.
Welcome back to the Awakening Conversations podcast. My name is Kate and I'm here with my co-host Amanda. And today we want to talk about ascension and consciousness. These are kind of buzzwords perhaps, or words that you hear a lot of when you enter into the spiritual community, you have your awakening, and they are very large topics to begin to wrap our heads around. I know for me, the word consciousness has always been something from many years. I'm like, what on earth is this consciousness thing? And I think even for me until recently, even understanding truly what ascension was all about has taken me some time to really feel clear and understand that. So we really want to unpack those two topics a bit for you today and help you understand how lower frequencies, lower vibrations, lower consciousness works and is in play in the world, and how that is impeding us in some ways in terms of our growth, but it's also something that we can begin to work with. And it is part of the awakening journey to become aware of these lower vibrational frequencies within us that exist with us through our own upbringings, our own experiences of life, how we can work with them, and then what that kind of does and allows us to move into, and how that can be another catalyst for change within our lives. And essentially, moves us beyond, let's say, even just feeling good all the time to interacting with the world on a level where life truly does become a very tangibly different experience. And, we have our own personal experiences of what it's like living in, let's say, more low vibrational, lower consciousness ways, what life, how life interacts with us in that energetic level, or at least that's one of my examples, and how when I've shifted out of many of those lower vibrational thought patterns, states of being, into something that is much more open and free, how that's really shifted my experience of my life, and really wanting to showcase that for you today and give you something to begin to work with as part of your own awakening journey. So Amanda, really looking forward to unpacking this conversation with you today.
Same. Yeah, let's see where it goes.
Yeah. So let's start with just talking a little bit about ascension. And Amanda and I, we've said before, we met in an energy guide program last year. We're both taking it again this year. And one of the lessons that we had a few months back was about the difference between awakening and ascension. And I really loved this understanding that our awakening is about our own personal expansion. So we're coming to understand more of who we are. We have a broader concept of the world. And our ascension is an elevation. And essentially what is happening right now on the planet for all human beings is that we are going through an ascension process. The planet is as well. What that means is that the actual frequency with which we all live in is beginning to raise. And that our own bodies then are vibrating at a higher frequency, something that is actually measurable with science and a little probe. And what that means, though, is that as a frequency, we have a frequency shift. This is science as well. That when things rise, whatever's at the bottom can't really come with it. So it comes up for us in an example of how this is affecting us on a human level. As this ascension process happens, lower vibrations, lower energies, lower levels of consciousness, let's say, or even frequency, cannot rise with us. And so for us to fully experience an ascension, a rise in our frequency, we need to begin to look at these lower vibrational patterns and behaviors within ourselves so that we can work with them, clear them, heal them, to effectively begin to experience what life is like, both physically, spiritually, maybe even like at a mental level, definitely a mental level, when we are really working with what comes up for us to go through this ascension process that is happening for us, despite whether we're aware of it or not. But the more awareness we can create, it can help us to navigate this experience with a little more grace, a little bit more focus and intention, I guess, to not feel like all of a sudden life's just been tipped upside down and you're in these dark places. So that's my long little explanation there of ascension. Hopefully it's somewhat clear. But what we also really want to unpack a little bit here too, we've used words like frequency and vibration. And so, Amanda, do you want to share with us something that you've come across that really gives us a clearer understanding of those two concepts and then how they sort of fit into this conversation around our ascension and consciousness?
Yeah. So I listened to a video by The Alchemist, who she's a really great teacher on YouTube, covering all sorts of spiritually related topics, and she explains them in a way that I haven't heard anyone else do on YouTube. So I'll put a link to this video in the comments, but basically, she was in this particular video, she was looking at the difference between vibration and frequency and distinguishing how these concepts are slightly different, and then how we can understand the process a little bit differently. So essentially vibration is more of a current state of what we're in. It's how we are thinking and feeling in a moment in time. It has to do with manifesting in this 3D world, and it's not necessarily a steady state that we stay in. Whereas frequency is something that we attain or we develop and grow over time. She described it like a savings account. It's something that we can add more to, and it basically acts as like this protective mechanism or this buffer, and it improves our experience through increasing our frequency. And she talked about it is comparing it to our having to do with our level of consciousness and our awareness. And so getting in our heads that we can be high vibe but low frequency, we can be high frequency but low vibe, we can be low frequency, low vibe, and it can be high frequency, high vibe. And if we are only focusing on our vibration, this moment in time, and we're trying to keep that high at all costs, that is not helping grow our frequency, because the ebbs and flows of life, the ups and downs, are what helps us develop our consciousness and awareness. And so we need to allow ourselves, as you mentioned, to have those lower vibrational energies come out of us, be seen, rather than stuff back down. Like we prior to awakening, we learned that we are to suppress things that we don't like. We keep them down. And so the awakening process allows us to begin to see these things. And so developing these abilities to be with these lower vibrational experiences and allowing them to move through us and coming to new awareness and new consciousness of what those energies are, that raises our frequency, so that allows us to ascend to a higher level, we'll say, not no judgment, but to a higher state. And so that's how we can be at a higher frequency but in a lower vibrational place, because that's part of the process of life. And as we move up in frequency, we can manage those lower vibrational states in a new way, right? We can, because we're cultivating these skills and these tools and an awareness of why these things are coming up, and so we can kind of surrender, and like they can move through us a lot more quickly. So things get easier as we get to a higher frequency way of being. And so I think that was helpful for me, because I think that people get trapped in this idea of like, oh, I need to be high vibe. Only I don't want to come off as low vibey, or I don't want to be a downer. And that's where we get into bypassing, right? Because we're just ignoring the fact that we can't always be in a high vibrational place all the time. And in that way, it's giving ourselves the grace, as you mentioned, for whatever is, right? It's allowing us to accept all that is, rather than having to control and manipulate and things be a certain way, when that's not what they actually want to be.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so much that you said in there, and I think I want to give sort of some examples here so we can kind of like get a grasp on, when am I being, what would you say is, we're in a low vibration and we're holding a low frequency. What would a low vibration that we're holding but a high frequency look like? How can we understand at any given moment what our frequency is? But maybe we can start by unpacking, like we said, that low vibration is where we're more, the thought patterns, the emotions that we're experiencing are of a lower vibration. So things like, I think there's those scales that we see on the internet where love, joy, whatnot, they are, let's say, high vibrational states. When we are in a low vibrational state, we're probably in things like shame, guilt, fear, regret, hate, judgment, criticism. So, we can see, okay, when I am, let's say, I'm going to put this as an example for myself, because this one's a very clear lived experience for myself, of like being critical, very, very self-critical, very judging myself quite a lot, picking myself apart. That inner voice that I've had for many, many years, that speaks to me in those ways, tears apart my efforts or how I look or things I've said or whatever it is. That essentially is my mind keeping me feeling those lower vibrational feelings, thinking those more low vibrational thoughts, because it's like our unhealthy ego tearing us apart. It's self-judgment, it's criticism, that then emotionally then we feel so bad, right? So that is us experiencing low vibration. Now, if I have a higher frequency, or if I have a low frequency and a low vibration at the same time, I'm going to find it really challenging to heal, I guess, to face those things, to work with them, to believe that actually I can change this, or this doesn't have to be my way of feeling about myself. And I guess, and you can add to this, if we have, in this situation, a low vibrational thoughts and emotions, and we're holding a lower frequency, this is most likely where we're probably, and maybe even if we had a high frequency, but let's just stay here, where I want to numb and distract from all of these things I'm feeling, because I literally can't see how anything could be different. Because unfortunately, holding a lower frequency, it's more challenging for me to then really like reach higher for hope or reach higher for possibility, which I think they're even like vibrations that are just over that, say, let's say middle line where we want to cross from a low vibration to something higher, is even the sense of hope can be reaching a little bit of a vibrational level higher to begin to not so much lift us out of, but then put us into a vibrational state where we can say, okay, well, I can change. But the understanding here being, as you said before with your example, we don't just simply want to go into some high vibration and be like, oh, it's fine. I'm just going to move into joy and then, go for a beautiful walk in nature. My problems are, it's not a problem. I'm just going to feel joyful all the time. That is that spiritual bypassing that we've talked about. What you want to do when you've been able to access hope or possibility is in that vibration, understand that, okay, great. Now I need to understand this lower vibrational thoughts, feelings, emotions that I have, and how can I begin to work with them to heal? Maybe this is where inner child work comes in. This is maybe where plant medicine comes in. Maybe you want a little bit higher vibration for the plant medicine, but whatever, who knows where you're at. But just here's where your opportunity exists by getting a little bit more higher on that vibrational scale to begin to look at the things that are challenging you to work with them. And it's through then that working with them to heal them, shift them, that helps you then essentially move even higher in a really more, let's say, what's the word I want to use here? Like, not like realistic up the chart, but you're actually genuinely moving into a more high vibrational state rather than just forgetting and pretending that you don't have any issues or problems and that you totally love yourself when you don't. Like it's more sustainable, perhaps, is what I'm trying to get at here. Like you're literally actually truly moving into those states. And so that is another way then we can be effectively affecting our frequency. Is that what do you think that, that example is really explaining there, that from The Alchemist?
Yeah, as you're talking, what I can relate to from my own experience is that there was a time where those thought patterns, I was completely oblivious to them, like them even existing. Like they were running the show, and there was a lack of awareness that there's anything, I'm gonna say wrong, but anything detrimental like that, even the inner voice is there. So that's like low frequency to have that lack of awareness. And then I can recall a story that I can share is I remember we were living in Costa Rica and I was going to go to this yoga class, and I pulled into this parking lot, and there were these, it looked like parking spots to me, but they were like, there was grass, but it looked like parking spots. And I pulled into one of them, and this guy came out and he started scolding me for parking there. And it was like a completely honest mistake. And I noticed this internal like ridiculing of myself, shaming for making that mistake. And I realized like, oh, I have this internal part of me that is acting like this self like monitoring authoritarian, and is like admonishing myself for making a mistake. So how much have I been like protecting myself, not wanting to make a mistake because I'm gonna, someone else is gonna ridicule me, or I'm gonna ridicule myself. And so, I turned out, I apologized, and I turned out, I was like, God, that guy was a jerk, number one. But then I'm like, wow, look at, like, I feel like my fight or flight response was activated. And I found myself telling myself, like, why did you do that? Da, da, da. And then I was like, hey, wait a minute. Like, and then just this overwhelming sense of like here's what forgiveness is. It's like, forgive yourself. You made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I feel like that experience increased my frequency by that new awareness of I have this unconscious part of me that's keeping me in check, in line, behaving to protect myself from other people getting me in trouble. So I'm protecting myself. So I'm being that person. Yeah, that act of becoming aware of what's operating unconsciously, the patterns that we've taken on, the lower vibrational patterns that we've taken on from our family, from our society, whatever conditioning that we've been through, starting to become aware of those and how that is operating on autopilot within our own consciousness, and then beginning to shift that through this new awareness. And it's almost like it can be really dramatic. Like that was a really dramatic aha for myself, where I went from unconscious pattern to I see it, and now anytime that wants to come up, I can respond differently because I now see it. And each time I see it and I don't allow that automatic response to run the show, I am incrementally increasing that frequency, rewiring things and it's taking me to this like physical, energetic place because of being essentially by those experiences that happen from this new place of awareness. And so it's like, I think it's incremental. It can be incremental over time from this new place of awareness. And so that's where I think if I was just like high vibey and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna smile my way through this and not feel like what I was truly feeling in that moment, I wouldn't have gained that like wisdom, that insight that allowed me to shift that. Now I can't, because I saw that, I can't unsee that anymore of that program that was running in my brain, my consciousness, my energetic field.
I think that's a great example of how exactly just high fiving your way through that, like dismissing the man yelling at you and going, oh, okay, no problem, peace and light, or I don't know how you do it, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
The beautiful thing you said there is exactly like we're witnessing this thing within ourselves. One, your whole fight or flight response kicks in. Like you can't miss that physical reaction, right? You hear the way you berate yourself in your head, but you have this beautiful thing that happens of like, no, I'm going to forgive myself for that. Like there's the power. This is something that I talk about a lot, is like when we do begin to become really aware of that internal narrative, because I know how harsh mine has been. It is compassion for me as the one I always go to, is like, okay, first and foremost, hold compassion for yourself, for whatever this voice might be like telling you is wrong with you or what you've done wrong, or, you know, the way that it speaks, because that's the neutralizer that gives you that ability to shift out of, and maybe some from that low vibration into a place of complete neutrality, and into then actually, how can I see this differently? Because essentially that is the practice that we want to begin to cultivate, is our triggers, those low vibrational things, as you said, our patterns, our programming, our conditioning, all of the things that we've come to tell ourselves are truths about who we are from our, you know, experiences when we're young, that those ego-based stories. Our ability to face them, look at them, not be run by them, is what then shifts us over here where you said, you know, then I could forgive myself. There's your vibration raises. And you had that beautiful awareness, the opening of like, oh, I don't need to speak to myself in those ways. I can be kinder to me. This is where we step into a sort of place of power. You've opened to this place of awareness. And this is really where our awakening begins to happen as well. And our awakening unfolds more, because once you've got that awareness, you're also expanding this ability of, who am I? I'm not this person who's just letting my mind just run, and this is the sound of it. You know, the fact that you're even able to catch yourself in a moment of like, oh, that's not true. I don't need to be worrying about whether I'm making mistakes or doing wrong by people. Like, that's a story, that's a narrative, that's something that I can be consciously aware of, and I don't need to run it. I can take it out of my thought pattern, and it is this more and more of us becoming aware of that, where we are expanding then, as I said before, that great definition of or difference of our ascension and our awakening process, where that we expand then, because we're expanding in awareness of who we are, of our patterns, of our ability to work with it. What does forgiveness feel like? How does that work? How does that heal things? How does that shift things? And then that as well, I feel like, is a place where we can begin to, as you said before, I think this is before we started recording, like, we need to be able to hold our dark parts, our shadow parts. It's not about seeing them and then denying them and turning away from them. And we need to be able to see and exist in this world, and maybe unpack this a little bit, where, we can see horrible things, we can see challenging things, we can see fear-based narratives, we can see and hear propaganda, whatever you want to call it, and be in a more neutral place where we're not pulled into a lower vibration. And we're not trying to then bypass that and flip it into a high vibration and deny that it exists. But that we, over here, is when I guess we're starting to talk about frequency, when we have done our work to really look at the stuff within us and work with it, where our low vibrational patterns are, to hold them with more love and compassion and forgiveness and work through that. And we're incrementally growing that frequency. We're able to come to a place where we can be in this world, witnessing everything that happens, experiencing all the things we need to experience, but in a way where at that higher frequency, it isn't something then that has to draw us in and we feel so despondent, lost, hopeless, which then if we get caught there, we make certain choices that, we might numb again, we might binge food, alcohol, whatever it is that, in some ways keeps us in those low vibrational cycles that, on a bigger scale here is like keeping us in a sense of control here in a, you need the food, you need the shitty food, you need the medication, you need all of the things to buy to make you feel better. And, that's the whole other piece of this conversation. But that's sort of what this frequency piece is all about as well.
Yeah. You said a lot of good stuff in there. I think what came up is this idea that if you think about it like from a 3D, 4D, 5D concept, the 3D is just existing in this physical world, oblivious to the darkness that is existing, oblivious to the fact that we are creators, oblivious, living more in a victim state, whether we're conscious of that or not, kind of feeling powerless to changing the trajectory of our lives, not really being aware that our consciousness is programmed by our environment. And so we're just kind of absorbing and taking it all in. And then I'd say the 4D is beginning to become aware that things are not as they seemed, right? There's corruption there, within every system of society, it is not created with the best interests of humanity. It's not to say that everything's terrible and there's nothing beautiful that exists. But for the most part, the systems that are running the show are not meant to help elevate our consciousnesses.
Right.
It's meant to keep us controlled, limited, and it creates these thought forms, right, of limitation, lack, jealousy, greed, all these lower vibrational states, and we're not even aware of where those things, those ways of being, of thinking, of awareness, where they come from. That's more three-dimensional, we're not aware. But in the 4D, you start to recognize that, okay, our food is not there. Our food system is pretty crappy, at least in the United States it is. Our healthcare system is sick care. Our government is corrupt. And then in that place, there's like there's, what happens? You become outraged, and it's like it can be easy to feel like, okay, I need to fix this. I need to fix the system, and so I'm going to do things to change this. And then I think the next stage is recognizing that we change things through creating something new, recognizing that we are creators, that we are responsible for our own energetic state, where our energetic state is not a um, product of those systems. We get to choose our experience. And so the things that we do on a daily basis, the things we put in our mouth, how we sleep, how we wake up, whether we move our bodies, whether we meditate, whether we do things that give us joy, regardless of where we're at, we can finding the places where we can choose, and that remembrance that we are the creators of our experience. And so rather than, oh, I've a victim of my circumstances, I cannot do anything to change this, I'm stuck here, right? That's more of a low frequency place to be. To begin to do things that, we talked about, was it 2 episodes ago, about creating our own reality, beginning to recognize, where is it that I get to choose. And so when we do that on our personal level, then we see how our lives can transform. And then when we start to connect with more people doing that, then we start to build communities and new systems. And right, that's really how we're going to move away from the current reality of this lower vibrational state. Maybe this is a tangent. I don't know how I got here, but what I'm saying is that for me, is starting to recognize how my consciousness is not my own. That really became obvious to me when we left the United States. We were, in a regenerative agriculture farm in Costa Rica with very little internet. And I started to see, not being in that energetic bubble of the United States, how my consciousness started to change really quickly, actually. And things that I thought were mine, I realized that wasn't mine, but I thought it was mine. I was holding things that I thought were my own identity, ended up being, that was a byproduct of my environment. And so recognizing that we don't need to be these sponges, but we are these sponges, essentially. We're taking on all of these things, and beginning to, like, okay, things come up and it's like, where did that come from? Okay, that's not mine. And I don't know, I imagine we can do these things in the same environments that created them. But for me, it was really important for me to leave my environment. It became really obvious how my environment wasn't serving me, how it was making me, or it wasn't allowing me to become a better version of myself, essentially. And so that process of really beginning to see, like, living in that energetic, I call it like an energetic soup, where I'm swimming in this water and I don't even realize how this water is affecting me. And I was just absorbing it. And it's so pervasive through all like living in a culture that was very different, and contrasting that to the culture where I came from, I could see how it was coming in at every level of life. And so because of that, it's easy to not even see where these things are entering your awareness. And so how this pertains to this concept is that to raise our frequency, we have to begin to start kind of dissecting the things that are running the show for us. And so, wherever we are, meditation is a great journaling, these practices that allow us to start to change how we perceive our own experiences, right? Become more reflective. We can then start making shifts in our lives that then change our overall experiences.
Oh, so many things I want to say. First thing I'm going to say is just to the tool that you spoke there of meditation. I might have said this before, but I believe my experience of meditation is that the reason it's so powerful, or was for me, was that it gave me an ability to strengthen the fact that I have something in me. I guess it's my awareness or my consciousness, and I have the ability to decide where I point it. I'm either pointing it at my thoughts, running and getting lost in that and like going off in that daydream of that where my mind wants to take me, or I can this part of me can go, you know what, you're thinking right now, and you go, oh yeah, I am. I'm going to move that focus. I kind of think of it like a lighthouse light. I'm going to direct it over here to my breath. And then I'm going to pay attention to that. And it's like, to me, that is the muscle we need to strengthen within us to be like, I might be hearing this crazy noise on the TV or in the general speak of the population that I could get my thoughts and my emotions all tangled up in, or I can realize actually, I'm going to just pull back to that point of choice, that point where I go, I get to choose where I'm going to point my arrow, maybe just turn it over here to my own breath again, come into my own center, decide, is this something that resonates with me when I'm quiet and still in my own body? How does that feel? Like this is where the power of meditation really comes for us to discern what is truth, what is not, what we really need to give this awareness to, because this is what this, and for those listening, I'm waving my hand in front of my chest like a light. This is what helps us either be involved in like outside sources of lower vibration, which then either we can get caught in this loop of being fearful of whatever we're being told to be fearful of, or we can pull that in to the center and say, like, is this something I need to be focusing on right now? Like, how can I focus on me? Knowing that that exists, like perhaps there's some disease running around the planet. All right, well, where's my sense of control here? I can come in and go, well, I'm going to do everything I can to be healthy, right? And to be healthy, I'm going to be aware that there's something going on out there, but whereas I'm going to move my awareness to myself, my actions, my choices, to continue meditating, to feel calm, reducing my stress levels, keeping my vibration high, keeping my body feeling healthy. I can be moving my body. I can focus on taking an action that increases my strength and my health. I can be actively, choosing, all your choice comes back when you decide where you want to point this, your consciousness, your awareness, and as we said before, like, yes, the world could be like on fire, but you could be okay because you realize you can take preventative measures for the fire and not get burned down, or you can totally like point your arrow at it and just be like, oh my God, I'm going to die, and then be stressed out and, stuck in that lower vibration. So, I mean, in terms of meditation, I feel like that's why it's so powerful. It's this like ability to be aware. It strengthens that muscle to like know where we want to point it, and then really cultivate that we can point it to our own knowing and truth, and that present moment where we can be with what truly is and like decide. It's such a powerful tool, like done over time, with the amazing benefits of the fact that also at some point the thoughts quieten down. Like I feel like that's such a side effect that sometimes what people are trying to chase when they go into meditation or think they need to achieve. The other thing I want to say is, as you said, that sometimes we're not even aware of what how our environments are creating the consciousness that we're holding. This example that I had a couple of episodes back when we were talking about choosing or creating your own reality, I went back to Australia last month, and I live currently in Japan in a very small Japanese village. I don't have TV because it's all Japanese and it's strange. I never read the news. I don't watch, programs, whatever. I don't watch that stuff. So when I went home, there's TV there, and I always like to flick it on, like, just see what is this crazy world up to and all the things. And oh my God, like, these TV, what on earth is that in Australia? To all our Australian listeners, like, turn it off. It was so incredibly confusing and scrambling, and like I had these really weird like physical sensations, energetic sensations, and mental sensation of being like, I don't know what this is. Like, ads on TV for, I think it was insurance, and there's these people dancing around on a screen, not even completing full sentences, and like then some fluffy character comes in and I'm like, I don't understand. Like, it hurt my head. And then you watch some of the TV shows and it's just like, oh, what? And then you watch the news and you're even like, okay, turn this off. So it was so extreme for me to experience, having, been tapped out for so long, that I just could not help but think to myself, how would I feel mentally, physically, emotionally, if I watched that and was plugged into receiving and consuming and absorbing that every single day? I would feel, I can feel it in my head now, I would feel like so unsure, so uncertain. I would not know what's going on,
And that's
right?
by design.
Yes, and this is what we really want to get to. Exactly. Like, to me, it was so obvious. It was like, it was programmed that way. Like,
Programming.
Yes, this is it. This is how it happens. And, you might call us conspiracy theorists or woo-woo or crazy, whatever. Stick with us. Pay a little bit more attention to that. How do you feel? Yeah, I'm cool with that. But then I want to go. Yeah, no, go.
Well, no, I mean, that term is essentially was created to keep people from not questioning, not listening to their own intuition, to be controlled. So, okay, you want to call us conspiracy theories. Maybe because we even mentioned that term in this podcast, certain words on YouTube are flagged or whatever. So anyways,
okay, all right.
Anyway, go ahead, continue.
That's all right. So what I wanted to add to that is, like, then it was like driving around, like we had to travel from Melbourne up into the countryside. And so like there's billboards advertising things on sides of the road. And the thing that really struck me about the advertising on a billboard was the languaging that was used in these advertisements. And so much of it was derogatory. And it was like poking that you're an idiot. And if you do this, then, what a loser. And I know that part of that is an Australian cultural thing of like, it's not a very, good quality that we have of like poking fun at people, but it had gone beyond that to me. And whether I'm too sensitive to know, I don't know, but it just felt so much shaming and like pointing fingers. Now, what I wanted to highlight that for is, like, when we're receiving that all the time, like, that's then how we turn around and treat other people. They're saying it's okay to speak to each other like that. And then we've got this, this is where this separation, us and them. This is another thing here that is a low vibrational, lower consciousness program that, my husband always tells this example of, and this is a sidetrack, but the movie, I think it's called Ants. It's the Disney movie. Is it Ants?
Yes,
or
I believe.
Bug's Life. Bug's Life. Yeah. Bug's Life. Where there's the grasshoppers who come and take all the food from the ants, right? And so they're controlling. And I think there's some line in there that if the grasshoppers say that if the ants knew that there's more of them than us, then we're screwed, right? And he said, this is how we need to understand this, that if all the ants came together and said, we're not giving you our attention, our money, our any of it anymore to the grasshoppers, like, it would be chaos, right? And so this is why everything around us, maybe not everything, but a lot of what we consume, are being told, are being shown on TV, is in some ways keeping us in that fear-based matrix, fear-based thoughts, low vibrational, worried, stressed, sick, because that way we're not going to go to the grasshoppers. You know what? I had enough of this. So really, I think the point of what we wanted to have this conversation is to really bring to your attention, I'm sure that many listening are aware of it, but for those that haven't really grasped that yet, here's where low vibration, low consciousness exists in the world, and how it is affecting, our full potentials, what we, our health, our prosperity in so many ways. But that's my little tangent there of that. We hope you're enjoying today's episode of the Awakening Conversations podcast. And if you are, we'd love for you to hit subscribe. This helps us enormously to grow our channel and to get these conversations in front of more and more people. We really appreciate you being here and tuning in. So let's now return to today's episode.
So regarding meditation, I'm going to piggyback on what you're saying as far as why it's so powerful, because everything is, the currency is our attention. And if we don't consciously develop an awareness of where our attention is directed, it's just going to go to the thing that they've perfected. I'm going to say they, like those, who's running the show, they've gotten there because they are good at saying, hey, look over here. And if we don't have a grasp of where we give our attention, if we don't have sovereignty and authority over that, it's going to go to the song, dance, pony show that's happening, that's keeping us in a lower vibrational state. And so that's another reason why, in addition to what you talked about, learning to cultivate that power over our awareness. It takes that power away that we're a lot of times unconsciously giving if we are paying attention to whatever distraction. There's a new distraction happening all the time of something we're being told we need to care about. And so if we start to cultivate something like a meditation practice, we can step away, maybe, like it'd be good to step away from paying attention to those things, focus on ourselves, and then through that, we cultivate a higher frequency where we can then look at those things and they don't have the same impact over us as they once did. And that's, really like our breath and our nervous systems, like cultivating a deeper awareness and understanding and relationship with these things is what basically unlocks us from that power grab that we are living in if we're living unconsciously in our day-to-day lives. And then another thing I wanted to mention, as you mentioned, use example of like whatever illness is going on, and so let's focus on what can I do, and that's an amazing step to take. But I would also add to that is looking at our fears, like beginning to really dive into like, oh, I fear death. For most people fear death, right? That's like underlying most fears that we have is a fear of death. And that motivated so many people's actions over the last 4 years, is that their own fear of mortality. And, for me, obviously I still have one, but I think through working with death and coming to learn the nature of us as souls, it's lessened, right? Like, and we can become more free when we no longer are controlled by that fear of death, right? Because that essentially can stop us from living our lives if we're, anything that triggers our that deep underlying fear. We can be very easily controlled and manipulated in our lives by whatever existential threat is created in the time. We can be directed in a certain way. And so through that cultivation, through meditation, through different practices, through disconnecting from that fear programming, rewiring our brains and our consciousness, we can then begin to live in a way that is a higher frequency, that can be of this world and doesn't have to be drawn down by looking at what's happening.
Yeah. And I want to say two things, like, even it doesn't even have to be like existential, things that come in. It could just be the fact that when we fear death, that, we feel like time is finite, so that we've got to hustle, work really hard to have all the things. And then, like, it's that example of like, well, I've got to make all this money now to then get to that retirement age to then enjoy my life. Like, if you could embrace the fact that it could go tomorrow, and actually, I don't know, there's so many ways for people to create a new relationship with death, and what that would mean for them and how they live their life. But I think it's such a powerful topic, and I think we have someone coming up soon that we're going to be talking about this in more depth. The death and creating a new relationship with death and what it really means. We've had Sarah May on like a near-death experience, and I don't think in her case though that she sort of saw of where we go, but in so many of those cases, like there's these stories of what happens. And fortunately, I feel like I've come to a place where actually I don't fear it anymore. I actually feel like when that moment comes, there's some beauty and joy in that. And it's only my ego part that's afraid of that. At a soul level, I actually kind of in some ways excited about it, which sounds a little bit weird. But also I feel like I can approach even people in my life passing from a way where I can feel a deep sense of joy for them. Obviously, there's the physical loss of this human, but it's a beautiful thing to be able to come to. And when that's not a factor in life, it shifts how you operate, and to release that very big fear. And I know so many people have it. And the other thing I wanted to say then is, to kind of segue from where we are now, like why we then even want to cultivate a higher frequency, why we want to do the work with what we feel within our lives that is low vibrational. Are they looking at our own programming, our own conditioning, our own beliefs about ourselves? Why we want to cultivate that ability to strengthen that awareness through our meditation practice, to have that sovereignty of our awareness, is because when we do and are able to operate in higher frequencies, and then we have that high vibration of our types of thoughts that we have, because we've done the work to heal and to rewire our brains, as you said, there's several things that begin to happen when those two things match up. So the example I wanted to give of that is like my life pre last year. Last year we sold our hotel here in Japan that we had for 7 years. And that 7-year period pre-selling that hotel was the most intense time of my life. There's so much fear, there was so much stress, there was so much negativity at times, there was so much challenge, there was anger, there was heaps of that stuff. It was like an incubator for challenge, and so much growth came out of that, and I never give it back. But when I look back on that period in my life, because of the stress, because of the worry, because of the fear that I held in my body, and I felt it in my body, several times I ended up going to the hospital because I had like lumps in my boobs, and just felt so unwell, putting on weight out of nowhere, and my body was just under too much stress for too long. And I can now look at that part of my life and see that I was experiencing a lot of lower vibrational feelings and thoughts. And I'm going to say that probably pre my awakening, my frequency was probably low as well. And when I think about then how life responds to us, because you mentioned that, in terms of our vibration, this is where manifestation comes in, right? Comes into play. And energy is just drawn to like energy. And when I think back to the types of people that would come into our life when we were living and operating in that way, it's just like the worst of the worst. Like so many quote unquote assholes came into my life out of nowhere. I used to have really cool friends, and then all of a sudden I just meet this fucking shit of the shit. Excuse me, that was a lot of swearing in one sentence. But that's how bad it was. And then I can remember, like you get phone calls and you're hanging on for good news, and it's so much bad news, and like things just so much challenge, and like it was a whole different playing field. Fast forward to now, we've sold that hotel. So much stress, worry, anxiety has lifted. It's a real shift out of one chapter of my life into a new one. I've had my own awakening. I've been doing a lot of the work within myself to heal those lower vibrational patterns. And essentially, expand my own awareness, as you said, to help me then cultivate a higher frequency that I'm able to hold. And obviously, that's still a work in progress. But I look at my life now, and it truly does feel like, and the visual I keep getting is like being in a building that has an elevator in the middle. And that prior, I maybe got off at level 3. And now I feel like I've gone up in that elevator to, as they say, level 7. And so, because I feel a lot less stress and worry and anxiety for multiple different reasons, not just selling the hotel, but from that work I've been doing, I can see now how life, universe, the world meets me differently because of that higher vibration I'm holding and that higher frequency, I guess, that I'm working at. I don't know where that is on the scale of frequency, but I feel like it's higher. I've done a lot of work. But it's like the people I meet, it's like they're so different, and the conversations I have are so different, and then when the phone rings, it's like, it's not bad news, although I still wait for it. It's like, "Actually, here's some great news, and this is better than you're expecting this news to be." Like, there is this, for me, as I've seen this, like, qualitative, perhaps is the word, difference in how my life responds to me is what I really wanna say. Like, what comes in, and it's amazing. So it's like, this is why that work is important, and then from here, I feel like it's like I keep getting the visual too with this building that I tell you, like I got off at level 3. It's dark, there's clouds, there's smog. I see it as a city scene. And here I feel like I've come up to a balcony and I'm looking out, and it feels so much more potential filled. I feel more free. I feel more able to dream big. When I operated here with my lower frequency and I had my challenges of these lower vibrational states, I did not feel hopeful. It was really hard. So an example here of like, okay, I got the option to be able to sell a hotel, but there's so much personal work within that as well, that when we do it, this is why, life, this is how we create that new reality for ourselves, to be piggyback off that other episode. And then, ultimately, as we do this as a collective, when we can see and live and operate from this higher vibration within ourselves, hold a higher frequency, like, collectively it's different. And the thing I always want to express is like, we see each other differently, we treat each other differently. This is the new paradigm that we talk about, is what we individually feel about ourselves, about others, when we're able to raise our vibration and our frequency. There's potential here, there's change here, there's possibility, there's kindness, there's inclusion. Like, to me, this is where we get to become the ants saying, "You know what? We wanna live like this and create that. And I wanna feel this because it's my birthright to feel that, and not be, like, persuaded to feel some other way." That's my little
Yeah,
soapbox
but you
bit.
can't see that possibility from the lower place, right? It's like,
No.
because you're living on the
Mhm.
program of
Mm.
scarcity, limitation, it's
Mm.
not possible. Um, yes, I relate to your story in terms of, I think what it comes down to is operating under the older paradigm rules, right? So basically, for me, it was operating under the programming of who I think I should be,
Mhm.
versus tuning into who I am and what my soul wants. And
Man.
those are two very different energies at play. I can recall, um, so for me, that looks like when I was, you know, going through medical school, like, trying to, like, grind, trying to become this person who, in my mind, I needed to be to prove myself, my worth, because that's what I learned as far as what's worthy.
Mm.
And so I was operating from this lower vibrational belief system of, like, this is how I gain success in life, to this is how I live a good life. And it was just felt hard. It felt exhausting. It felt unenjoyable. And then it was like walking away from that. it's like this huge weight lifted off my shoulders. It's like I can see myself, the shift in my brain, just like making that decision, and it was like, woof, all this was
Mhm.
lifted. And similarly, yes, it's like when we are in tune with living from more of a guided place of our higher self, our soul, um, we're gonna be seeing the synchronistic opportunities, and recognize, like, for me, it was recognizing it's like, I'm meeting all these cool, creative people that are doing really interesting things in the world because I'm starting to live that way, and
Mm.
therefore
Mhm.
we are finding each other on our own paths, on our own journeys to reinforce. It's like, oh, see here, this is an okay way to live. Keep doing that, and then I
Mhm.
live that way a bit more, and then more people are entering my field, and now it's like, okay, it's just normal to, sell all your things, to go live in another country, to teach your kid,
Mhm.
like, everyone kind of in my realm, it's like they left because they wanted something different for their kids. They're conscious
Mhm.
enough to like, we get to choose this. We don't have to settle for this status quo life.
Mhm.
We value things that are different than what society is telling us to value. And so we're going to create something different. And so it's like here where I'm living, it's like the people are always, oh, we need this, and someone has this skill, and so then, okay, I'm going to create this. And it's like we have all these opportunities to experience because people are seeing a need for it, and people are creating things, and people are support, like, that's amazing that you're doing that. And it's like everyone's just kind of feeding each other's
Mhm.
creativity versus just like, here's the rules that you follow, this is the way you live
Mhm.
life, this is the way you dress, this is the way you eat. And instead it's like, think outside the box, create something different. And
Yeah.
that kind of feeds this cultivation of something new. It's like, I feel living
Mhm.
here where we've lived, it's like, it's just normal that people don't look at me like I'm weird because,
Mhm.
I have all these business ideas, and it's like, that's normal, and people
Mhm.
praise it. And so anyways, yeah, it's like, could I have planned this to be my reality 5 years, or no, it's been a slow process, or it's been a gradual process, right? To
Yeah.
get here. And it's through taking these steps, right? Through
Mhm.
beginning to cultivate something different within me than I was living when I was just following my unconscious way of living, essentially.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I think that's a powerful point to bring forth to that. I think we've said this before that when we do have our awakening experiences, it can feel, depending where we are in the life that we've been living, very isolating. We can lose family members, we can lose a lot of friends if they are, holding on to old beliefs that we no longer can hold. So I know that a lot of people that I've spoken to, it's like, wanting to find your tribe. This is why doing the work, and working with our vibration, this is the reason we start to talk about vibration and frequency, is because when we can heal and shift those lower vibrational ways of being, and we move into those higher vibrational ways of being who we truly are, right? We unburden ourselves from things that are just keeping us down, unable to be the fully expressed versions of ourselves. And especially, I'll say that for me, like, for me, it's was so many low vibrational thoughts about who I am, that stopped me being this version of me. And I've had to work through that so that I can be this version of me, to meet you, to do a podcast, to do something I love, right? So there's an example of it. So, it is that work that we're doing with those low vibrations, to clear them out. That this is where we then do, as you've said multiple times, it is an accumulative effect on our frequency, where we are being a different version of us. And just like I had that example of like the people that come into your life, it's the people that match you at that frequency, that vibration. And they're the ones that, like you just said, like there's so much creativity in your group of friends, there's so much potential. The experience that I've had as well is like the conversations I get to have. To me, I always do it with my hand of like hear up. It's no longer these conversations that, and for those listening, I'm just kind of holding my hands together in a line, and, the conversations are from that line up. But sometimes I've felt, or if I think back on another time in my life, like the conversations were so, down, and they went around in circles, and they didn't do anything good for anybody. It was just like there's so much, shaming and pointing and hate and like ridicule and like us and them and like jealousy and all kinds of things down there. And now I get to meet people where we can talk about potential and possibility in nearly every conversation. We're looking up at what else we can do. So just through those two examples for people, why this work is important, why this cultivating this awareness of what in your life you may be like absorbing or consuming that is contributing to you feeling maybe stuck in a low vibrational state that feeds low vibrational thoughts and feelings. Cultivate a meditation practice. I always want to say, like, prioritize your health. Like, that is also another amazing way to like bring yourself out of low physical vibration, right? One more thing I'll say about my trip to Australia. It was this very small country town, and this isn't the case everywhere in Australia, but we were working days out in the farm and we needed lunch, so we'd go into town, and it's just like chips and burgers and like pies and pasties, and it's like if I eat this every day, my body goes, like it feels a really hard time processing that food. And then if I add TV on top of that and commercials, like my whole system is just like, what the hell's going on, right? So for me, I think too, it's like take care of your body, eat well, sleep well, drink lots of water, get outside in nature, ground, find energy practices to clear, because this vessel is vibrational as well, and we can contribute to how we feel vibrationally through what we consume for the physical body, how we move it, how we care for it. And it does play a big piece in this whole ascension process and, us being able to hold a higher frequency, because the body's going through that as well.
That's a great
Anything else you
point.
want to add to that?
Yeah, I think probably my last point that I feel called to make is about, from a larger perspective, we are being facilitated by the earth to ascend, to raise our frequencies, because the frequency of earth, as I understand it, is increasing. And what's happening is, like we mentioned for ourselves, we, the lower vibrational energy is coming out and to be seen, to be processed in a new way rather than suppressed. And so that's, I see what's being exposed every day, something new feels like. It's because the earth is purging these systems that have there's a lot of darkness that it needs to be seen, and something needs to change. Things need to change. I think this is in the Gene Keys. Gene Key number 55 is basically a template for what we're going through on a collective level right now. We're moving from the shadow of victimization into the gift and the city. They're both the same, which is freedom. And so in that process, I think he mentions in that one how these energies are being purged from the earth, and people are taking exit points and taking these energies with them when they go. And so we can also almost look at like that's something that kind of explained the last 4-ish years to me, as far as like more people leaving. It can be explained from this perspective of we are ascending and lower vibrational energies are leaving this planet, and that is a way that potentially that is happening. And so being able to look at from a higher perspective, the process of death is actually something that needs to happen energetically within us. Like we have to go through all these death and dying experiences to go higher, right? Parts of us have to die.
Right.
And so, getting more comfortable with death
Mm,
is
mhm,
actually, I think, part of the process. Like being able, like for me, it was
mm,
really powerful to go through that experience with my mom. Like that was my awakening, was being with her
mhm,
through her death. And that changed me in a way that, that is, I can't go back from,
mhm,
because I now see life in a completely different way as a result of looking at death. And so,
mm,
sorry, I kind of got on a tangent there, but as far as like the bigger picture, right? Like um, whether we want to focus on raising our frequency or not, it's going to happen because that's what's happening
mm,
on a planetary level. And so things are going to come up for us, and we get to choose, like, do we want to just high vibe our way through it, or do we really want to work with it and change our experience here and increase our frequency along with the planet? We get to choose. We can numb ourselves if we want to. Like that's the whole part of like being here, is that we get to make those choices. And I think part of the awakening process is beginning to choose that we want something more for ourselves than the unconsciousness that have been living in. And so imagine if you're listening to this, you have this desire for something more for yourself, for your life. And yeah, I think that's all I want to say as far as like, so really like learning to love all of it, the whole experience, right? And I think
yeah.
for me, where I'm at currently, it's like I can be with people that I used to want to argue with, right? Like I can see like
Mhm,
indication of my growth is that like I no longer need to try to change another person and have them and correct them and have them see things the way I see things. Whereas in my previous version of myself, like, oh, I'm gonna explain to you why my way is the right way.
mm,
Um,
mhm,
and so like we'll take politics, for example. See things a certain way, and like part of my growth is like, okay, like they can have that experience. It's different from how I see things, and I don't need to change them. And that's part of recognizing it's like I'm really only responsible for me. I'm not responsible for changing another person. And so that's
mhm,
like part of the whole process of starting to cultivate like own our choice in life, our choice in this path, and really choosing like how we want to live this. Do we want to live in victim land? Like, well, the earth is not gonna allow for us to live there much longer, right? What we're going through
mm,
on a collective level. So it's gonna be really uncomfortable if we still want to continue playing that game. Um,
okay,
no judgment, but I mean, like I said, I think I mentioned previously on episodes, like there's still been times in this past year where I was like living in victim mode of like, oh, I can't
mhm,
change like I'm kind of feeling a bit stuck, right? I can't change
mm,
things. Um, so we're always being presented with opportunities to move into something new. And but I think the more that we like work with it, we get to see this whole frequency vibration thing at play and kind of can reflect upon our own journeys. And it's like, how did I used to respond to things and how do I respond to things now? And those are
mhm,
kind of benchmarks for us and the progress that are making on cultivating our relationships with our awareness, our attention, our breath, our nervous system. And
mm,
so, yeah, we're never perfect, right? We're never going to be perfect in all of it, but just acknowledging like how far we've come, I think goes a long way in like just kind of surrendering to wherever we are right now and being
Yeah.
good with that.
Yeah, beautiful. And then, yeah, just to reiterate, it's happening anyway. So if you're feeling yourself stuck in stuff, then you have a beautiful opportunity right now to work with it, to choose to heal, do seek out the support that you need to clear it. So you can be, moving into a place where you do feel naturally through your growth, a greater capacity to hold when we do always and will continue, I think, to some point for some time to meet our lower vibrational parts, but it's just another opportunity, another opportunity, another opportunity that we're continuously healing. And that's, helping you to raise your frequency over time. So, Amanda, this has been a fun conversation.
Yes, as
Thank you
always.
for everything that you brought.
You
Yeah.
too.
And to everyone listening, if you have questions, comments, feedback, we'd love to hear it on our YouTube channel or send us an email on the website. And we thank you for listening, and we'll join you in our next episode.